Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the WildChat podcast with me, Adam, and Dylan as your hosts. Once again, we are all together again, which is super awesome, super fun. We're joined today by Alec from the Penn State, is it Booze, Bets, and Ball?
Yep, that's
podcast.
it, yeah.
So we're going to be breaking down a little game preview of the Northwestern-Penn State game. That's this Saturday, 11 a.m. Central. As always, I have to mention that we are super excited to be a part of the Big Banter Sports family. Make sure to check out Big Banter Sports at Big Banter Sports on Twitter and on Instagram. And also check us out at the WildChat on Twitter and on Spotify. We also post our episodes there and on YouTube. Kind of messed that up, but it's okay. Alec, what's your for the Penn State podcast?
It's the number 3 and then a capital B and then PSU pod.
Awesome. So I think we should just dive right in. Alec, do you want to talk a little bit about maybe the Penn State keys to winning the game? Although I think it might be very, very difficult for Northwestern to win. But still, what are some of the keys to winning this game against Northwestern? Or what do you not have to do completely wrong because we're not winning this game?
I will say, I think the big thing for Penn State is to come out and be prepared. There is a stark difference between last week where it's 8:00 kick, you're home. It's the whiteout game. You're playing your ranked Iowa team who, you had some hatred towards after the 2021 game. So I think they were very amped up for that. And now obviously it's an 11 a.m. local kick. Northwestern Stadium, I think, only holds like 47,000 to start with. So the environment is obviously completely different. So for this team, I just think it's come out, don't start slow. They had that problem a little bit with Illinois a couple weeks ago where it took them about the middle of the second quarter to get going offensively. So that's the main thing for me is come out prepared to play. And the second thing, don't turn the ball over. They haven't done it yet. This season, actually, the only team left in college football to not turn the ball over somehow, which is pretty impressive. But, teams that aren't supposed to win sometimes stick around if you give them short fields or give them a pick six or a scoop and score and a fumble. So those are kind of the two big things for me. Come out ready to play and continue to not turn the ball over.
I got a question. So I'm a big University of Miami fan. So I've grown up hating Manny Diaz these last couple of years just because, he was great as our defensive coordinator, and then we made him our head coach, and, he kind of scared me for 3 years. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about Penn State's defense. Obviously, he's a terrific defensive coordinator.
Right.
What have you seen from Penn State's defense really this year, and what are some of kind of the keys that you're expecting from that defense against Northwestern, and who kind of stands out on the defensive side?
Yeah, so I'll start with Diaz. The big difference between him and Brent Pry, who was the defense coordinator for 6-7 years, something like that, before becoming the Virginia Tech head coach, was Pry was more on the conservative side where they didn't want to give up big plays and they just wanted to keep everything in front of them for the most part. Diaz, it's only happened once this year where they've given up a big play, and it was actually Delaware of all teams. But his aggressive style is we're going to force negative plays on the other team. And it doesn't matter if they drive all the way down to our 10-yard line because we feel that we're either going to get a sack and they're going to be held to a field goal, or we're going to get a turnover and they won't get anything. And so far this season, that's been the case. They have 11 turnovers and I think 13 sacks, I think. So they're doing pretty well in both those departments. So for them, it's just to be aggressive. They like to get after the quarterback, rush the guys. If you saw the Illinois game, they did all kinds of things to that Altmaier kid where he threw 4 picks. So that's kind of their main thing, is to just disrupt the quarterback, get them uncomfortable. And it's worked so far. And really the only game that it didn't work since he's been here was the Michigan game last year, because Michigan just quite simply didn't try to throw the ball. So it's worked for them. In terms of players, I think with what I saw from Northwestern's offense last week is the corners, Kalen King, who he said the other day he's been bored because no one will throw at him. he's going to, I guess, be a little busy for once this season. So I'm sure he'll actually be excited for that. So I'm looking at him, and Chop Robinson, the defensive end, the transfer from Maryland, was pretty quiet the first 3 weeks, honestly. And then this past week had a really disruptive game against Iowa. So I think, he's kind of in his groove now. It took him a few games last year too to get going. So similar thing here. So those are the two guys I think with Northwestern's now pass first offense, that those two guys will probably be the highlighted ones on the defense.
It's good that you mentioned King and Robinson as someone that's kind of, I would say, more of an NFL fan than maybe a college football fan. And I guess that's kind of switching-ish, but I would consider myself NFL-based. Like, I'm very excited to see Penn State come into town just because of all the, the NFL talent that's going to be in the league in the next couple of years. You mentioned King, you mentioned Chop Robinson. I'm also really excited by Abdul Carter.
Yeah.
He started off the season a little bit slower than what he did last year. What have you seen from him so far? And I kind of see him as kind of an X factor for this team, especially against a Northwestern team that probably is going to try and throw the football early, and then it's not going to work. They're going to go to the run game, and then something bad's going to happen.
Yeah, so the thing with Carter is, the athleticism and the size is there. I'm not going to say that sticks out because it's there. But the thing that I've kind of noticed different from him last year was he's been a lot better in gap discipline and going after run lanes, which is something that he struggled with last year in the Michigan game. I mean, the whole team did, but he was also someone who did. And I just think growth from that aspect, more than anything, learning to play the linebacker position more at the college level has been his biggest improvement this season, because, at his size, 6'3", 250, and I think he runs like a 4.5. Like, you're not going to get much better from a physical and athletic standpoint. It's all about the mental part with him at this point. So I think he has definitely gotten there. I also don't think they fully have unleashed him yet. He hasn't really gone after the passer that much this season yet. They've been pretty content with using their strong defensive ends to get after the passer. And Diaz likes to bring his defensive backs on blitzes a lot, actually, more than his linebackers, it feels like. So I don't know if they're waiting for the Ohio State game to start to get that going again like they did last year. But it's hard to see what a lot of these guys on defense are like, because quite frankly, they haven't played a lot of snaps this season. Iowa only had 30 something offensive plays last week, and they had blowouts the first two games. So a lot of the starters didn't play in the fourth quarter. So it's been hard for these guys to get in a groove, I feel like. I think now, though, at this part of the season, even if a game is out of reach, they'll probably keep them in there to start to get them ready for the heart of Big Ten play. So with Carter, he definitely has the ability to take over a game. It just kind of feels like it hasn't been utilized yet, and I think that's by design.
It's good to see that Manny Diaz kind of hasn't changed, because I remember that exact same style of defense back when he was in Miami 2017. Forced a lot of pressure, turned into a ton of picks. You guys don't have like a turnover chain or something like that, do you?
No, only the running backs are the only ones that have a chain, actually. The cornerbacks did have one. That it said lockdown you on it last year. I don't know if that's come back yet. I didn't notice yet, but I know that, they did have one last year.
Gotcha. I wasn't sure. That was his big thing in Miami. I feel like we got to ask you about like Drew Allar, and you know, what does he need to do in this game to kind of be successful?
I think just do what he's doing. They've completed one pass that's gone 20 or more yards in the air this season, which I don't think a lot of people expected that to be the case, because the expectation coming in with him versus Sean Clifford was, we could go downfield more. And it's actually been the complete opposite. They've done it once. They've just pretty much played within what the defense will give them, and just trying to get him in rhythms and make him comfortable. And he hasn't turned the ball over yet, which obviously is a big thing. And it's the reason why I think they survived a scare from Illinois for sure, because even though he didn't have a great game, he didn't do anything negative in a sense where he gave Illinois the ball on a short field or gave them a score. So I just think he needs to keep doing that. I don't think they're at the point yet where they're going to ask him to go win a game for them. He might have done that against West Virginia the way he came out firing, but I don't think that was really their plan going in. It just kind of happened. I think until they get to Ohio State, they're just going to take it easy, try to keep everything in front of them, not, just make sure you don't turn the ball over and get him comfortable with these receivers, because the thing is, outside of Keandre Lambert-Smith, they still don't really know where they're at with the receivers. So I think just having him build chemistry with these guys, complete some short stuff, get an understanding of each other's tendencies is kind of where they're at right now.
You mentioned the receivers, but I think the biggest part of the offense, kind of from what I've seen with Penn State, is just the running game and kind of just the two-headed powerhouse in Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton. Do you have one that you kind of like a little bit more than the other? Do you like the 1-2 punch? Kind of what's your general thought process?
Yeah, so I mean, we're used to Saquon Barkley having 200 whatever carries, and the next closest guy had 30. So it's like totally different from that. They had a couple years there where they were going 4 deep because they really didn't know where to go until Journey Brown broke out towards the end of 2019, and then he had to retire, and they did the whole thing over again for 2 years, which wasn't fun. But now I think it works. I think both guys like it too, because the whole thing with running backs aren't valuable in the eyes of the NFL anymore, kind of them not having that workhorse workload. I think that'll help them in the eyes of NFL scouts. So I know people always like, oh, I'm afraid one's going to transfer. I look at it, I think this is now more a situation that college running backs prefer. But they haven't totally got to where they were last year yet. Singleton actually, his longest run this season is 19 yards. At this point last year, after 4 games, I'm pretty sure he had about 8 yards or 8 carries over 20 yards. So it still hasn't broken out. I think they will try to do it this week, but so far I would say Kaytron Allen's kind of been the safer bet at running back, because he is a little less reliant on the home run play and needing, kind of the open space like Singleton is. He'll make his own play, get 4 to 5 yards, and just keep the chains moving. So Singleton is the weapon where, if he gets going, it can get ugly for a defense quick. But Kaytron Allen is kind of like Mr. Reliable, where we need a first down. We want to milk the clock at the end of a game. We want to make sure we don't fumble. He's kind of the guy they're going to. So I think both are completely different, and it works in their favor because it gives them different looks to put at the defenses, and they can do a lot of different things with the offense because of the skill sets being so different.
Yeah, so kind of switching gears completely, do you have any questions for us about the matchup this weekend?
Yeah, of course. So I will say this. I was very out of it after the Penn State game because I think we played at the same time this past weekend, right? They were both night games. And when I opened up the box score on Sunday and I saw Northwestern won, I was like, like that's it. Like, I was somewhat surprised, but then when I actually clicked on it and I saw what the score was, I was like, oh. So, my big thing is obviously there was a lot that went on at Northwestern over the offseason. And, was that in a sense what happened that fourth quarter a turning point? Because when a program goes through the changes that Northwestern did, and you're down 21 points with a quarter to go against a divisional foe, most of the time, most teams in that situation would probably roll over and lose by 28-35. Like, what did you guys see from this team in that fourth quarter that, maybe a light came on? Like, where are you guys feeling after that?
I think a big thing was it feels like this team has finally bought in. And it's definitely a weird situation because last year Northwestern played tons of games where, they would be down by a ton entering that third quarter, entering the fourth quarter. And like you said, they would roll over and lose by a ton last year. There were countless games where that happened. However, this year it finally feels like they've bought into David Braun. It finally feels like David Braun, has a grasp on this team. A question that we've been asked a ton of times is, what does David Braun have to do in order to stay the head coach after this season? And it's something like what happened in that fourth quarter that kind of shows that if he can continue to, keep the team like that, believing in themselves, that he would be able to kind of remain the head coach as the years go on. So I think that's one of the biggest things. And then I also just think that, this team is finally learning a little bit more about itself and what they can do. The defense finally started to make some tackles and be able to stop the run in that fourth quarter. The offense finally opened up. Ben Bryant looked like an actual good QB for his first time. So a lot of that happened, but I think the biggest thing was the team finally bought in and they believe.
And to kind of echo the idea of them buying in the press conference after, Braun kind of talked about how, they're down 21 in the third quarter, but for the first time since he's been here, they weren't flinching. They were like, Coach, we got this. They went out there and they played their hearts out and they figured it out. And this team, after kind of a really tough season last year, and then everything that happened in the offseason, then they beat UTEP in the home opener 2 weeks ago, and it's like, wow, they actually won a game. This is great. And then they go to Duke and they get blown out by Duke. But then they, things look ugly for 3 quarters against Minnesota. They turn it around. These are the moments that David Braun needs to have if he wants to keep his job continuing until next year and the year after. But it also shows that this Northwestern team, they're able to compete, and it's only going to continue to feed that idea of them buying in. So I think that's kind of my biggest takeaway from the Minnesota game is, one, they have the talent to compete in the Big Ten West. The Big Ten as a whole, maybe not so much. We'll see on Saturday. But definitely there's a belief and there's a buy-in to the program, and I think that's the most important thing after the program had its darkest summer ever.
Yeah, for sure. To answer your original question about whether this is a turning point, for me personally, I don't think I could answer yes or no until the season goes on a little bit further. Mm-hmm. But like Adam and Dylan said, I think that I feel like our team has been very discombobulated. Like, it's been obvious that there's talent in certain areas. I think that was one of our big things last year. We had multiple NFL draft picks, which is wild to say. But we still were 1-11. So clearly that talent, no one was working together well enough for it to all come together. And I think that this game was the first time I really looked at the team and was like, okay, there's talent in different places, but everyone's finally working together and everyone's finally coming together. And it doesn't feel like this disorganized mess that it felt like for me watching the entirety of last season. So turning point, I'm not sure, but I think certainly, as Adam and Dylan said, like, it shows us that we are capable of doing well. We are capable of making plays. We are capable of coming back 21 points plus and winning a game. So I think, yeah, definitely a big takeaway is that we are able to, like, we can.
Gotcha. I will say selfishly, we were hyped that actually happened because the whole thing with the Big Ten East this year is if there's a 3-way 11-1 tie, so the tiebreaker would come down to the conference record of the teams you played in the West. And Penn State plays, obviously, you guys, and Michigan and Ohio State both play Minnesota. So that was actually huge for us on a selfish note that happened. But like you mentioned with the draft pick, so last year, like, to us, when I was at that Hurricane game, the 17-7 game, it was Evan Hull, running the ball a lot. Now the identity, I guess, has changed. What has Ben Bryant brought over, to this offense that has kind of changed it from a ground and pound to now Northwestern's throwing for 400 yards in a game?
I think the funniest thing about Northwestern is that if you look at Northwestern throughout history, it's been a run-heavy team. And I think that's kind of just the Big Ten style of football. But, I mean, in the past, recent history, we've had Justin Jackson. We've had, obviously, Evan Hull. Like, those are two really solid running backs that have been kind of staples next to the Northwestern name. But for the first time, I mean, this team wants to throw the football. Because I think that's where our strength is. I think it's the strength in the receivers, especially. AJ Henning and Cam Johnson at the 1 and 2, and then obviously you saw what Bryce Kirtz did last week: 10 catches, 215, Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week, his first 2 career touchdowns too. So I think this team has a strength at receiver, it doesn't have a strength at running back, and it finally has a quarterback that can actually throw the ball downfield if given, some protection. That's honestly the thing I'm really worried about against this Penn State team with an aggressive defense, a physical defense, a very talented defensive front. This offensive line isn't very good. I would say it's probably the weakest part of the offense as a whole. They're not very deep. There's not a lot of, strong play up there so far through the first couple weeks. But against Minnesota was kind of the first game where they really actually stepped up and they gave Bryant the time in the pocket to look downfield and make some throws. And especially in the second half, he wasn't really pressured at all. And he had the time to, put a good throw in there. And that's what happened, and that's what allowed him to throw for basically 400 yards. So I think that's kind of just the way it's been for Northwestern. They've kind of moved away from the running game because it hasn't worked, and they have a strength at receiver.
I also think, though, that a major reason we threw for 400 yards last game was also when you're down 21, you have to throw the ball.
Yeah.
I think that this team, when they can, they will still try to run the ball. Cam Porter was someone who, coming into the season, I hyped up a lot. I was a big fan of Cam Porter. He struggled a lot this year. Obviously, the offensive line is a big reason for that. But I still think that if they are able to, make the run game work, that they definitely will try that. Hyman is another great running back who has shown flashes so far this year as well. But Bryant is more accurate than any quarterback I want to say that we've had as well lately. You look at quarterbacks from last year, Brendan Sullivan wasn't accurate. He was very mobile. Helinski wasn't accurate really as well either. Bryant, he's that pocket passer, but he's been accurate somewhat better than we've normally had. But when he has that time, he'll make the plays that he has to kind of win a game, and I think that's what we've seen so far.
I also think the offensive creativity, too, is another piece. Like, we're running the ball not just with Cam Porter or Joseph Hyman, who I actually really like Joseph Hyman. I think he's going to be a really big player for us in the next couple of years. Just his speed in the open field is really impressive. But, we're giving run plays to Jack Lausch, who's our third string, low-key probably actually fourth string quarterback. But he's getting a lot of looks, sophomore quarterback, and he's really mobile with his legs. But also, there's so many run plays for AJ Henning too. Mm-hmm. So the fact is, the running back room in just pure running the football isn't the strongest part of this team. So Mike Bajakian has really looked at other ways of incorporating a run game. I like AJ Henning in the jet sweeps, but it's just this offense it's so weird because for any offense to be successful, you need a really good offensive line, really. And that's something this team doesn't have, so they need to kind of compensate for that in kind of trickery and, being difficult with the football and kind of just being unpredictable a little bit. So I think that's kind of where Bajakian's kind of focused on this season, trying to think of different things and different looks to take a little bit of the pressure off the offensive line, too.
Understandable. Yeah. I guess then moving on to defense, I noticed that Duke and Minnesota both, I think, ran for over 5 yards a carry. And I saw Duke was, I think, over 6, actually, and they had 5 rushing touchdowns. Obviously, this is kind of the week that we want to see Penn State finally assert itself with big runs, especially with Singleton. What has been kind of the problem with that? Is it just Duke and Minnesota just kept going at it, eventually it broke? Or is it more of there's a consistent 5 to 6 yards and the middle of the defense is weak?
Yeah, the latter, unfortunately, I believe.
Okay.
I just think our defense is not strong against the run game. It's just just there are holes always. Like Minnesota, I believe, over 200 yards rushing
in 244
in the first half.
No,
first quarter.
It's 150 in the first half.
It was bad.
Sorry.
I got you.
But it was really bad. Is essentially what I'm trying to get at.
I think the total over the past 2 games has been 512 yards on the ground.
It's insanely bad.
I did read that. Yeah.
So I wouldn't even give credit to Minnesota and Duke. Well, Duke is great, but I still wouldn't give them credit offensively. It's really our problem.
I think a big thing was, one, I don't think the defensive line gets anything done. The defensive line sucks. Everything, a lot of stuff on this team is really bad. So I think that consistently running backs are really able to kind of get through that, those initial guys. Our linebackers are, kind of where this defense lies. And Bryce Gallagher and Xander Mueller, both leading tacklers in the Big Ten.
Saw that.
A big reason for that is, because, they're running the ball all the time and the defense is always on the field. That's a major reason for that. But they are also big tacklers, and I think that that's probably why you're getting those 5-6 yard runs a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Is because they're getting through the defensive line, and then the linebackers are making a play, but not really early enough to limit the run stop. Against Minnesota in the second half, that's when you really started to see the defense learn how to stop the run. I think Minnesota was, you said, like 150 in the first half, 90, something like that in the second half. However, about half of those 90 came on one big running play on like a 4th and 1 that they broke off for a 50-yard touchdown.
I saw that, yeah.
That's something where we thought the game would be over after that, and then they ended up coming back and then made tons of stops throughout the fourth quarter. I think Minnesota only had like 1 or 2 first downs the entire time. So the defense was finally able to, even getting some negative yards plays or really limiting the run to only 2 or 3 yards per play. I think that was a big thing where Bryce Gallagher was very good, jumping some plays. There was one play, like 3rd and 2 late in the game. He completely jumped up and tackled for a loss. That's the one play that stands out to me. So I think consistency is another issue with the way that the defense works in stopping the run. But yeah, Penn State might run for 400 yards, and I wouldn't exactly be surprised.
I mean, personally, we would like that. We've been kind of waiting for it, but I'm trying to think of anything else I had here. Went over Ben Bryant. That was the big thing to me because I watched the Rutgers game and I actually did not know that like he transferred in from Cincinnati. I'm like, wow, Northwestern, like that's a big get. And then I saw they struggled in that game, but now I think, kind of like I talked about with Allar getting used to these receivers on our team, it kind of looks like Bryant did the same thing in that game. Like you said, the big breakout for a couple of those guys at the receiver position in the second half. So that was the big thing I wanted to look forward to. And I think that's going to be probably my favorite matchup for this game is the Penn State secondary going up against those guys. Cause I think it'll probably be their best test so far this year. I don't think West Virginia is a run first team. Delaware, I can't count what they do as anything of substance. Illinois, I think, wanted to throw the ball, and Altmaier completed more to Penn State than he did at Illinois. And then Iowa, their wide receivers have 14 catches on the season, so I can't say anything about that. So I do think that for us, this will be the first good challenge from a solid receiving corps. So that's the big thing I am looking forward to.
Do we want to make some score predictions here?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first if you guys want me to, but I'm on the kinder side, I guess, if you want to put it that way. But I do give Northwestern a lot of credit for what they did at the end of that game last week. That did impress me, but I think Penn State might start a little slow. Like I mentioned, the vast difference in the atmosphere. They actually, James Franklin said today, they didn't put music on at practice because they wanted to simulate Saturday. I don't know if you saw that, but yeah, that was interesting that he said that.
So we're all
not wrong.
Well, so we're all on our student section, like executive board, and we got a big crowd at the start of the Minnesota game, at least. However, Ashleigh and I went to get content for like our social media pages, trying to like find a play where they would make a lot of noise. It was the worst 15 minutes of sitting in the student section I've ever seen because there was just nobody making any noise, and then everyone had left by the middle of the second quarter. So yeah, I don't blame James Franklin for.
The line I think was 27. I think that's not a bad number, honestly, in my opinion. I was in like the 41-14 range when we did our predictions, so I'm gonna stick with that. I think that's a solid number.
Yeah, I can start. I think the question is not whether or not we lose to Penn State. It's how much are we going to get absolutely smacked by Penn State. Yeah, I'm going 45-3.
Wow.
I think, I don't know what happened of the third and fourth quarter of our last game. I hope it happens again, crossing my fingers. I just don't have faith that it will against a team that's ranked so highly. So I'm going to go 45-3.
I'm going to be a little bit nicer. I think actually Northwestern gets the ball first. They score a touchdown on their opening drive.
Ohio State.
Okay. It's like an Ohio State from like last year moment. Northwestern's leading like 7-0 early first quarter. And then kind of the wheels kind of fall off from there. I think Jack Lausch actually scores the rushing touchdown. It's from the 7-yard line, scores a rushing touchdown. And then Penn State, scores 21-28 to end the first half. I think Northwestern will get another touchdown in the second half, maybe a Bryant to Henning bomb or something. Make it 3 straight weeks with the pair linking up. But I think that at the end of the game, it'll be 42-14 Penn State.
Look, the odds are stacked against Northwestern.
Oh, are we taking Northwestern?
Listen. Manny Diaz lost to FIU. That is all I am saying.
That did happen.
I cried after Manny Diaz lost to FIU. And for that reason, I will never trust Manny Diaz again. Northwestern held Penn State to 17 points in a hurricane last year. Well, now it's going to be a nice 70-degree day, 11 a.m. I think Penn State doesn't wake up on time. Penn State 17, Northwestern 21, Northwestern wins. We're rushing the field for a second straight weekend.
Again.
Let's go. That would be fun, actually.
Yeah, I'd like that better than mine.
I don't really think that, but I'm going to say that because
I'm
going to hope for it.
Hope for it. Why not? Manifest it. Let's start it now.
Let's start it now.
Yeah. It could happen. Weirder things have happened. I'll tell you that much. Weirder things have definitely happened.
Well, I think this was a successful episode, successful crossover. You want to close it out, Ashleigh?
I can close it out. So thank you so much for joining us on the WildChat. It was super fun to have you on our podcast.
Yep.
Everybody that watches us, please make sure to check out Alec's Penn State podcast as well. I won't make him repeat his @ because it sounds a little complicated, but it's at the beginning if you want to go back. Our @ is at the WildChat. And don't forget to check out Big Banter Sports as well at Big Banter Sports. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully we'll have good news for you on our next episode, but we'll see. Adios.